Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, here with Doug.
Hey.
Last Stop came out last week on Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, I'm just going to start out with go try it.
Sure.
There you go. Review done. It's one of those games where I think I'd seen a little bit of it looking at, or prior to it coming to Game Pass, just because it's in a genre that I like. It's by the guys who did Virginia, which was a smaller game that I feel like gets brought up way more than it deserves to get brought up, but I feel like randomly out of nowhere just kind of pops up now and then. I'm like, oh, okay, I like Virginia. That's a cool game, but it's by the same guys who did that, so it's very similar to that. But it's also one of those Life is Strange, Telltale-y games, those types of things, where you're just kind of walking around, you've got some dialogue choices, you do minimal interacting with things, you've got quick time events, all that kind of stuff going on. I want to start with that because I kind of looked at, there were some pre-release reviews that came out, and I kind of glanced at them like, ooh, maybe this isn't good.
Yeah, it was odd. Like, I feel like up for the release, it was like weird because like the first Annapurna game like released on, maybe one of the first ones that felt like to like be released like on Game Pass immediately. I was like, all right. Anytime there's a game that's like immediately on Game Pass, I'm not like woohoo. It's like, all right, okay, let's just, okay, that's neat.
Yeah,
that's neat.
So I kind of looked at a couple of reviews and I was like, this sounds like every review I read was like, this sounds like what this game's supposed to be, because a lot of them talked about like, oh, there's not much gameplay. It's fairly short. Yeah. You just kind of watch it. And it's like, that's what this type of game is. Like,
sure.
It very much embodies that Life is Strange Telltale-ness to like the nth degree, where it is, there's only like one scene where you are really looking around searching for something. There's quick time events, but they're all like drink a cup of coffee, so it's not like a super intense.
Oh, sure.
So it's like, okay, there really is minimal gameplay, and I think you need to know that going in to really be able to appreciate that, because I think otherwise you're kind of looking for all of those things. The dialogue...
Is it a visual novel? Is it like then a visual novel? I mean, is it... Because, I mean, even Telltale games have you walking around quite a bit in them and like talking to people and that sort of thing.
You walk around, but it's all very directed. It's all very walk and talks. Like, oh yeah, you're just walking down the street and you just hold the control stick forward while you walk down the street, and there's only one path to go. And there's nothing. I don't know if I would go quite as far to say it's visual novel-y, just because it's not like... When I think visual novel, I think screen after screen after screen of text. And there's definitely things going on. And it's the same thing with Virginia. The guys who make these, I can't think of the name off the top of my head now, my bad. But they're very cinematic with the way they use the camera. So there's no HUD, there's no anything. But like, you always pretty much have the sense of nowhere to go because of the way that the camera pans. And you're just so used to seeing that in movies and film and in TV, where it's like, okay, boom, you're on the street. Which way do I go? And the camera's kind of panning down to the left. It's like, oh, I need to follow the road down to the left because that's the way the camera's panning right now.
Okay.
And if you've seen enough film and TV and things, you kind of have this idea of like what this is trying to tell you right now, which way to go. So you could probably go visual novel. Again, I think you need to know what you're getting into in order to like this game. I really do. I personally thought it was pretty good. Knew what I was getting into, and it was what I expected it to be. But if you're just like perusing Game Pass, like, oh, Last Stop. Ooh, this looks like cool sci-fi story. Start.
Sure.
Like, I'm 4 hours in, and all I've done is one quick time event to take some coffee and pick some dialogue choices.
Yeah.
That could...
But I mean, so like these games, though, I mean, all these games, they always hinge on their story then, and their characters and that sort of thing. And I remember, I felt like, I mean, I saw the trailers for this. I felt like the trailers did not explain like anything about this. So it says like cool visuals, but like really no sense of what the game is even about.
So the game is separated into 3 separate stories. You've got 3 separate characters. Each character has 6 chapters, and there's a prologue and an epilogue. Well, the last one's called the final chapter. Epilogue it's more than that. But essentially what it is 3 separate sci-fi stories. So one of them is like the like shady government agent, and you're like trying to figure out what's going on. One of them is like high school teens investigating their weird neighbor who might be some kind of alien or something. And then the third one is a body swap story where like you wake up and you like bump into this dude in the subway, and then all of a sudden you wake up the next day and you're in each other's bodies. And
these all like intertwine, I assume, it's like some extent, right?
They all take place in the same city. The only intertwining that happens up until that final chapter is like you'll bump into side characters. So like one of the characters is having an affair with somebody, and that person that the main character is having an affair with is the doctor for somebody in one of the others, like that type of thing.
Gotcha.
Or like,
gotcha. That's interesting. I'm surprised it wouldn't be like way more, especially if you're hopping between each 3 of them, like per chapter.
So this is where kind of. And we can talk more about the story in a second, but this is where kind of some of the issues arise for me with this, is each chapter is about somewhere between 10 and 25 minutes.
Yeah.
You have to do chapter 1, chapter 1, chapter 1. Okay, now we go chapter 2, chapter 2, chapter 2. So you're basically taking like a, I don't know, maybe 2-hour story, maybe hour and a half, 2-hour story, and you're chunking it into 6 parts. And you're making those parts come like interspersed with 2 other ones in between at minimum. And the stories are all good. The body swap one I wasn't a fan of for the first like 3 or 4 chapters. By the end, I like it a little bit more. The other 2 are very, very good. But the issue with them is they're kind of that old sci-fi thing where it's like, it's a slow build. It's not like big aliens blowing stuff up. It's just like, ooh, what's going on with this guy? Let's go check him out. Ooh, he got all green and funky looking. What was that about? Okay, next chapter. Okay, now we talked to him and he did something weird with my friend. Okay, next. But you have to wait like 45 minutes between each part. So because you're getting like slow build in all 3 of these, it's like slow build, slow build, slow build. Okay. Ooh, slightly new revelation, but still slow build, slow build, slow build. So
that sucks.
You're essentially doing the slow build for 3 stories for like the first 2 hours of the game.
So I mean, would it have? I mean, this seems like one of those things like in those development that like maybe it was split into like just 3 separate things entirely. Like, would you have preferred to put them in like 3 separate buckets? Like, would the stories even work in 3 separate buckets entirely? Like, you can play through like here's your 3 stories you can choose from, and just like play one and then play the next and then play the whatever, and then play the final chapter when you finished all 3 sort of things.
Honestly, the way, because I was thinking about this, because like, how would you do this better? And in my mind, it was each character you go chapter 1, chapter 2 for each chapter. You cut them each in half, because instead of doing then 3 like 20-minute chunk or 6 20-minute chunks, you're doing like 2 45 to an hour chunks. So I think you'd get a better handle on the characters. You're able to see more what's going on. And again, because each of these chapters kind of ends on that cliffhanger, there were points where like, okay, we could do this. And some of the cliffhangers are, of course, weaker than others and things like that. But I think that's the biggest problem, is that because they're so segmented like that, I just feel like the first 2 hours are almost like a slog to get through, just because it's like, there's some interesting stuff in here, but it's all that slow build up for this one big revelation that's going to happen. Because again, the story is only about an hour and a half, 2 hours long. Yeah. You're not having this like every time like new alien, new monster, new crazy thing. It's like, here's the little thing.
You're waiting for the 3 separate shoes to drop.
Exactly.
And it's just like, oh, that's...
And they all drop around chapter 5 out of the 6. So it's like...
That's such weird pacing. I can see it, because like they all come at the same time. Because, I mean, 13 Sentinels kind of does this sort, but just 13 Sentinels just do it way better sort of thing.
Yes, 13 Sentinels does it way better. 13 Sentinels pace... So the way 13 Sentinels has it out, which is, again, a very weird game to compare to out of this, because I don't think that's a very well-known game, but 13 Sentinels is much more like the different characters progress at different paces. So, like, there's one character where, like, 20% of the game, you could have played his whole story. There's another character where you play part 1 at the beginning and you play parts 3 and 4 not until you're like 80% done. So it's paced out much more specifically and intentionally, whereas this is just like 1 2 1 1 1 2 2 2 3 3 3 4 4 4 5 5 5 6 6.
Gotcha. And so every story is kind of built with that same arc. So instead of like let's hit it with like a big action scene in chapter 1 of this one, and then we'll save that big one for chapter 3. They all have their big scene like later.
Because they all have that. Something happens. What the hell is happening? I think I know what's happening. Let's check it out. Oh shit, it's happening. A little bit of resolution before we all get to the final chapter. So they all do end up meeting in the final chapter, because essentially there's like... I don't want to get too into spoilers, but there's kind of like... there's kind of like one overarching thing that's kind of connecting all these. And it's actually... The last chapter is really, really strong, I think, just because it does kind of go crazy. It goes kind of crazy into like, okay, we'll throw in all the sci-fi now. Like, we're taking the body swap stuff's got to make sense. The weird government stuff, this weird dude next... All this stuff has to make sense, and it all fits into chapter 3, or the final chapter, and your 3 characters all meet. And I really like the ending. I think it works well. And again, the stories, like the government agent one, they're very character focused. Like the whole thing is like, she is like now like, I don't know her age, but like mid-30s, like has a husband and son, but like in her 20s was like the badass, like they even reference like her in Afghanistan, like doing all this like secret agent shit. Oh, shit. And now it's like, sorry, honey, I'm late for dinner again. And it's like, so like her story is more about like balancing family life and then like trying to stay on top of things, and she ends up having an affair with somebody in the middle of it. So you're kind of like balancing all this stuff, and it's like, oh man, I used to be this great thing, and now there's this hotshot young agent. So it's kind of like this more like intrapersonal character development for her of like, How do I handle all this? So like the stories work really well. And again, it's a really good story. The one with the high school kids has some really cool things happening where essentially your one main character is interacting with a couple of her friends. They find this person. I think this happens in chapter 1, so I'm okay saying it. They basically run into him and essentially like kidnap him, hold him up in like this building, and like everything else takes place around this building, and he's able to do like weird stuff from this building to these characters, and like
oh, that's cool.
How much the characters know and don't know it plays with. It's very, very well done. So
yeah,
I really like the stories. The one thing I will say is this game, like I said, does some weird things. The look is kind of funky. Again, if you played Virginia, it's similar.
Yeah, it looked like a little. I don't. I'm trying to remember. It looked like a little too cartoony. It's like a weird kind of cartoon. I feel like sometimes cartoony, like it's like, oh man, I love this cartoon style, and sometimes there's like something a little off. And
it's one of those things because like you're this character having this affair, and you're running into this guy, and you're deciding should I break it off or not. And it's like these like kind of cartoony looks and faces and stuff. So it's kind of like it just.
So like it doesn't really fit the tone.
It doesn't quite fit the tone, and like sometimes it's. The game, I think, is supposed to kind of go back and forth between being comedy and everything. The body swap one especially, of course, has like the like funny like, ha ha, I was a 20-something kid and now I'm like a 40-year-old man. Ha ha ha.
It's a very Freaky Friday.
Yes, exactly. So it's got some of that. So it's got some humor in there, but just it's kind of one of those weird things where like balancing that with the look, I think is a little bit hard. The dialogue options are bad. It's
what does that mean?
Like,
what do you mean?
They don't do anything. A lot of them.
What does that mean?
There's the ending of the game has one binary choice for each character, and that just ultimately determines what happens. The dialogue choices leading up to it mean nothing. They don't change anything. They change a little bit of like inflection or tone on what you would say, but like there's never anything dramatic that's different if I pick like the assholey response or the nice person response.
Gotcha. There's like 6. You can get to all 6 endings no matter really what you do, kind of thing.
Yeah, you can just load in the final chapter, replay it, and go, okay, it's left bumper, right bumper for which ending you want for each character at the end, and you just kind of get to pick. Oh, I want to see this ending. Oh, I want to see this ending. So nothing really had any consequence the whole way, which is fine, but then that last binary choice throws me off because it's like, well, if you made me tell the story your way the whole way through, why are you letting me pick the ending?
Sure, that's interesting. I mean, that's kind of because like Mass Effect 3 kind of runs that issue
yes.
sort of thing as well. Oh, that's kind of a bummer. Although, I mean, like, is it that kind of game where you felt though that it was going to have like 7 separate like
no?
Like, was
but
the
it's
game, did the game lead you to believe that? I guess,
no, but the game led me to believe that it would have one ending. That's my issue.
Sure.
Is that it feels the whole way
like
okay, that's fine. Like I'm not gonna have a lot of choice in this. I'm fine with that. I don't need to have 16 endings and pick the. I don't need that. But like it feels like you're building to one ending, and at the end it's like, oh well, now which one do you want? And it's like, well, you told me the story. You made this character go in this direction. Tell me what the ending would. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's interesting. I've noticed. I know other games where I sometimes like have a hard sense of like, I don't know what this character is. Why don't you tell me what this character is, and then I'll make those decisions accordingly. Like if he's an asshole, I think like Telltale games do a really good job of like telling you your character is kind of an asshole.
Yes.
They're all Han Solo, but like you can, it's like, oh, I can sort of play in that with my decision making. But this one doesn't really. It's just like, here's your. Oh, that's, I don't know. That's funny.
It's one of those weird things where like it popped up and I just kind of went, oh, it matters now, like.
Yeah,
and again, like the dialogue options are like they're not overly dramatic, and again, it runs into that problem that I think some do, where all of your dialogue options are one word or like short phrase, but it's going to give your character like 2 paragraphs worth of text to say.
Sure.
So it's like there were one where it was like, "What do you think about this?" And you're like, "Great, okay, fantastic." And I picked like fantastic, like assuming the character was gonna be sarcastic, and went into this like he was like, oh, this is just so wonderful and it's fantastic. It's like,
oh, like literally fantastic.
Like it's like funny. Oh no, so it was great the sarcastic one, and like you know what I mean. So it had a little bit of touchiness there, but again, I think if you know what you're getting into with this, and you just really want some cool sci-fi stories, and you don't care too much about the gameplay, you don't care too much about the choices, I think the sci-fi stories that this is telling are very, very strong. And again, if that's what you're looking for, if you just want some cool sci-fi stories, highly recommend. If you're sitting here looking for like great gameplay, cool choice options, different, that's not what this game is. This game is here's 3 stories presented. They're going to tie together at the end. Some cool stuff's going to happen at the end. There you go.
Yeah.
But
and that kind of sucks. It seems like they were good stories, just kind of like not poorly told, but just like the mechanical framework of the game kind of like hindered the stories themselves.
Yeah, honestly, I think if you change the pacing of this, because again, I don't want to keep going back to like Telltale and Life is Strange, but if you look at Life is Strange, each episode is about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that feels good. Each chapter being 20 minutes, it feels like I'm back into the shoes of John. Okay, what's John doing? Oh, okay, we're out. You know what I mean? Like, right when you kind of start picking that character back up, you're popped back out. So again, honestly, I think the biggest issue is just the pacing with it. And if we could maybe cut them in half, get some 1.5 hour episodes would be good. But it's on Game Pass. It's free to check out if you have Game Pass. So there you go. Do it.
Yeah.
Do it. It's definitely worth that. Anyway, we are with Workforce Gaming. You can follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming. Subscribe to us wherever you're listening, and we will see you later.
Bye.